The attic smelled of dust and time, a scent that clung to the worn wooden beams and the faded velvet of old furniture. Harold Grayson, at 75, moved slowly among the relics of his life, his gnarled fingers brushing against the smooth mahogany of a century-old dresser. Each piece in this cramped space told a story. A dining table where his late wife, Margaret, had served Sunday roasts, a cracked porcelain vase from their honeymoon in Paris, a brass pocket watch his father had carried through the war. These weren't just objects. They were fragments of his soul, stitched together by decades of love, loss, and quiet triumphs. Harold's knees creaked as he knelt beside a cedar chest, its lid carved with intricate vines. Inside lay a collection of letters, yellowed and brittle, tied with a red ribbon. He lifted one, his hands trembling, and unfolded it. Margaret's handwriting danced across the page, her words from 1965 vivid as ever. My darling Harold, every moment with you feels like a treasure worth more than gold. He closed his eyes, her voice echoing in his mind, soft and warm like the summer evenings they'd spent on their porch. She'd been gone 10 years. But here, among their shared relics, she felt alive. The attic door creaked open, and Harold's daughter, Claire, stepped inside. At 42, she had her mother's sharp cheekbones, but none of her softness. Her tailored blazer and impatient posture belonged to the corporate world she inhabited, far removed from this house in rural Vermont. Dad, we need to talk, she said, her voice clipped, her eyes scanning the cluttered space with barely concealed disdain. Harold folded the letter and stood, brushing dust from his flannel shirt. What's on your mind, Claire? She sighed, crossing her arms. This house. These things. You can't keep living like this, surrounded by junk. It's not healthy, and it's not practical. You're getting older, Dad. You need to downsize. Her words stung, sharp as a winter wind. Junk. Harold's voice was low, but there was steel in it. These aren't just things, Claire. They're memories. Your mother's memories. Your grandparents'. Mine. Claire's expression softened, but only slightly. I get it, Dad. I do. But you're alone here, and the house is falling apart. The roof leaks, the heating's shot, and you can barely climb these stairs. I found a nice assisted living place in Burlington. It's modern, safe. You'd be comfortable. Harold's chest tightened. Assisted living. The phrase felt like a betrayal, a sterile box to store him away like one of his antiques. I'm not leaving my home, he said firmly. This is where I belong. Claire's jaw tightened. Then sell some of this stuff. You could afford the repairs. Maybe even a nurse to check on you. I've already called an auction house. They're sending someone tomorrow to appraise it. Harold's heart sank. An auction house. Strangers pawing through his treasures, assigning dollar values to pieces of his life. You went behind my back. His voice cracked, not from age, but from the weight of her words. It's for your own good, Claire said, her tone softer but unyielding. I'm worried about you, Dad. You can't keep clinging to the past. Mom's gone. This museum isn't bringing her back. The attic seemed to close in around him, the air heavy with her words. Harold wanted to argue, to make her see what these objects meant. But Claire's eyes held a determination he couldn't fight. She'd always been stubborn, even as a child. But this felt different, colder, more final. He turned away, his gaze falling on the pocket watch still clutched in his hand. Its faint ticking was the only sound in the silence that followed. The next morning, a sleek black SUV pulled into the gravel driveway. A young man in a crisp suit stepped out, carrying a clipboard and a polite smile. "Mr. Grayson, I'm Ethan from Worthington Auctions. I'm here to evaluate your collection." Harold led Ethan to the attic, his steps heavy. The young man's eyes lit up as he surveyed the room, his fingers brushing over a chipped teacup, a tarnished silver candelabra, a faded oil painting of a countryside. "Remarkable," Ethan murmured, jotting notes. "Some of these pieces could be quite valuable." Valuable. The word grated on Harold. To him, their worth lay in the stories they held, not the dollars they might fetch. He watched as Ethan cataloged each item, his enthusiasm a stark contrast to Harold's growing dread. By noon, Ethan had filled several pages with notes and promised to return with a detailed appraisal. That evening, Harold sat alone at the kitchen table, the pocket watch in front of him. He wound it carefully, the familiar click soothing his frayed nerves. Claire's words echoed in his mind. You can't keep clinging to the past. But how could he let go when every piece tied him to Margaret, to their life together? Selling them felt like selling his heart. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he wandered the attic, touching each item, whispering their stories to himself. The dining table where Claire had taken her first steps, wobbling toward Margaret's outstretched arms. The vase they'd bought in a Parisian flea market, laughing as they haggled in broken French. The watch his father had given him before leaving for the war, whispering, "Keep it safe, son. It'll bring me back." And it had. By dawn, Harold's resolve hardened. He wouldn't let Claire erase his past. But as he looked at the sagging roof and the peeling wallpaper, doubt crept in. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was too old to keep fighting. The thought made his chest ache, but he pushed it aside. He'd face the auction house, hear their appraisal, and then decide. For now, he'd hold on to his memories, as tightly as he held the watch in his trembling hands. The following week, Ethan returned with a leather-bound folder and an air of excitement. Harold met him at the door. His stomach knotted with apprehension. Claire was there too, her presence a silent pressure at his side. They gathered in the living room, where Ethan spread out photographs and documents on the coffee table. "Mr. Grayson," Ethan began, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Your collection is extraordinary. We've identified several pieces with significant historical and monetary value." He opened the folder, revealing a spreadsheet filled with numbers that made Harold's head spin. For instance, the mahogany dresser, likely from the early 19th century, possibly crafted by a master furniture maker. It could fetch upwards of $10,000 at auction. Harold's breath caught. $10,000. It was more than he'd earned in a year as a schoolteacher. But the dresser wasn't just wood, and varnish it was where Margaret had kept her linens, where she'd folded Claire's baby clothes with tender care. He glanced at Claire, who nodded approvingly, her eyes gleaming with practicality. Ethan continued, pointing to a photo of the porcelain vase. "This is French, mid-19th century, from a small but renowned atelier. It's chipped, but even so, it could sell for $5,000. Maybe more to the right collector." He flipped to another page. And the pocket watch Swiss, 1890s, with a rare complication. "We estimate $8,000 to $12,000. Harold's hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the watch rested. He hadn't let it out of his sight since Claire's ultimatum. The idea of it being sold to a stranger, displayed in some glass case, made his throat tighten. "These aren't just objects," he said quietly. "They're my life." Ethan's smile faltered, but he pressed on. "I understand, Mr. Grayson. but your collection could bring in over $50. 000. Maybe closer to $75. 000 with the right buyers. That's enough to fix the house. Maybe even fund a more comfortable lifestyle. Claire leaned forward. See, Dad, this is what I've been saying. You could stay here. Make the repairs. Hire help. You don't have to leave, but you have to let go of some things. Harold's gaze drifted to the photos on the table, each one a piece of his heart laid bare. He wanted to argue, to tell them they didn't understand. But the numbers were dizzying. The roof needed fixing. The heating system was on its last legs. And Claire's words from the attic echoed, "You're getting older, Dad." Maybe this was the practical choice, the responsible one. But it felt like surrender. Over the next few days, Harold wrestled with his decision. He walked through the house, touching each piece Ethan had flagged, trying to imagine them gone. The dining table, where Claire had once drawn crayon masterpieces. The candelabra that had lit their Christmas dinners. Each item carried a memory, and letting them go felt like losing Margaret all over again. Claire, meanwhile, was relentless. She called daily, her voice a mix of concern and impatience. "Dad, the auction is in 2 weeks. You need to sign the consignment papers. This is your chance to secure your future." Harold avoided the papers, leaving them unopened on the kitchen counter. Instead, he spent hours in the attic, sifting through the cedar chest. He found a photo of Claire as a toddler, sitting on Margaret's lap, both of them laughing. He hadn't seen Claire laugh like that in years. She'd grown distant after Margaret's death, her visits rare, her calls brief. He wondered if selling the antiques would bring her closer or push her further away. One evening, as rain pattered against the leaky roof, Harold sat with the pocket watch, its ticking a steady comfort. He thought of his father, who'd survived the war only to die young, leaving the watch to Harold as a promise of endurance. "Keep it safe, son." Harold had kept that promise for 60 years. Could he break it now? The auction house sent reminders, and Claire's calls grew sharper. Harold felt the walls closing in, his world shrinking to the choice before him: hold on to his past or secure his future. He didn't know which hurt more. The auction house was a grand, echoing space in Burlington, its walls lined with paintings and its floor crowded with polished furniture. Harold sat in the back row, his hands clasped tightly around the pocket watch. Claire sat beside him, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the stage where Ethan stood, gavel in hand. The room buzzed with collectors, their voices a low hum of anticipation. Harold had reluctantly signed the consignment papers, worn down by Claire's persistence and the undeniable reality of his crumbling home. But he'd kept the watch out of the sale, tucking it into his pocket as a final act of defiance. The other pieces: the dresser, the vase, the candelabraware displayed on the stage, their stories reduced to lot numbers and starting bids. The auction began, and Harold watched, numb, as strangers bid on his life. The dresser went first, its price climbing to $12. 000. The crowd murmured approvingly, but Harold felt a pang in his chest. He saw Margaret folding linens, her smile soft in the morning light. Gone. The vase followed, fetching $6. 500. He remembered Paris, Margaret's laughter as they carried it home. Gone. Each sale chipped away at him, the gavels cracked like a hammer against his heart. Claire, sensing his distress, touched his arm. "It's okay, Dad. This is for the best." But her words felt hollow, her touch fleeting. Then came Lot 27, a small oil painting of a Vermont countryside. Its colors faded, but its brushstrokes vivid. Harold had bought it at a flea market for Margaret, a gift for their 10th anniversary. Ethan's voice rang out. We have a rare piece here, likely by a local artist from the 1920s. Starting bid, $2. 000. The bids climbed quickly. $3. 000. $5. 000. $7. 000. Harold's eyes widened. He hadn't expected this. The painting wasn't just a keepsake. It was valuable, a hidden gem among his junk. When the gavel fell at $9. 000, the crowd applauded, and Claire squeezed his hand, her face alight with triumph. But Harold felt no victory. The money meant nothing when weighed against the memories. He stood abruptly, muttering an excuse about needing air, and slipped outside. The autumn wind was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. He leaned against the building, the watch heavy in his pocket. He didn't want the money. He wanted his life back, Margaret's laughter, Claire's childhood, the years before everything changed. Inside, the auction continued, but Harold couldn't bear to return. He wandered to a nearby park, sitting on a bench overlooking a pond. The watch ticked softly, grounding him. He thought of his father, of Margaret, of the promises he'd kept. Selling the antiques felt like breaking those promises, but keeping them meant defying Claire, maybe losing her too. When Claire found him an hour later, her expression was a mix of worry and frustration. Dad, you can't just walk out like that. The auction's almost over. You made nearly $60. 000 today. Harold looked at her. His daughter. So different from the girl in the photo. Did you ever love this house? Claire. The things in it. Did they ever mean anything to you? She hesitated, her eyes flickering with something guilt. Maybe. Or regret. Of course they did. But I'm trying to protect you. Dad. You can't live in the past forever. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that the past was all he had left. But he saw the strain in her face, the weight she carried too. For the first time, he wondered if her insistence wasn't just practicality, but fear of losing him, as she'd lost her mother. The auction ended, and they drove home in silence. The house felt emptier, its heart carved out by the sold pieces. Harold sat in the attic, the remaining antiques looming like ghosts. He didn't know how to move forward, but he knew he couldn't let go completely. Not yet. The money from the auction sat in Harold's bank account, untouched. Claire had hired contractors to fix the roof and update the heating, but the repairs only deepened Harold's sense of loss. The house was sturdier, but it felt less like home without the dresser, the vase, the painting. He avoided the attic, unable to face the gaps where his treasures had been. One afternoon, as Harold sorted through old papers in the study, he found a letter tucked inside a bucca ledger from his father's time. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words caught his eye. To Harold. My son. The watch is more than it seems. Look closer. His heart raced. He'd always thought the watch was a simple heirloom, its value sentimental. But the note hinted at something more. He examined the watch, its brass casing worn but intricate. He'd never opened it, fearing he'd damage the delicate mechanism. Now, with careful fingers, he pried open the back. Inside, tucked beneath the gears, was a tiny folded paper. He unfolded it, revealing a sketch of the watch and a cryptic note, property of E. Du Bois, 1895. Provenance, Swiss Royal Collection. Harold's breath caught. A royal collection. His father had never mentioned this. He'd been a humble farmer, not a man of wealth or connections. How had he come by such a piece? Harold's mind raced with questions. But one thing was clear. The watch was far more valuable than Ethan's estimate. He called Worthington Auctions, his voice unsteady as he asked for Ethan. When the young man arrived the next day, Harold showed him the note. Ethan's eyes widened as he studied the watch, his fingers tracing the intricate engravings. "Mr. Grayson, this changes everything. If this is authentic, it could be worth hundreds of thousands, maybe more. We need to authenticate it. But this is extraordinary." Harold's heart pounded. Hundreds of thousands. It was unimaginable. But the money wasn't what mattered. The watch was his father's legacy, a mystery he'd carried unknowingly for decades. Selling it now felt unthinkable, not just for its sentimental value, but for the story it held, a story he didn't yet understand. When Claire heard the news, her reaction was predictably practical. "Dad, this could change your life. You could move somewhere warm, somewhere safe. You wouldn't have to worry about money ever again." But Harold shook his head. "This isn't about money, Claire. It's about family. Your grandfather left this to me for a reason. I need to know why." Claire's frustration was palpable. "You're being stubborn, Dad. You're holding on to things that don't matter anymore. What's the point of a watch, even a valuable one, if it keeps you stuck here?" Her words cut deep, but Harold stood firm. He contacted a historian at the University of Vermont, Dr. Ellen Harper, who specialized in 19th century artifacts. She agreed to examine the watch and its note, promising to dig into its provenance. Over the next week, Harold waited anxiously, the watch never leaving his side. He felt a spark of purpose he hadn't known in years, a mystery that tethered him to his father and, in a way, to Margaret. Dr. Harper's findings came in a detailed email. The watch was indeed from the workshop of Émile Dubois, a renowned Swiss watchmaker who'd crafted pieces for European royalty. The note suggested it had been a gift to a minor noble, later lost during the chaos of the early 20th century. How it ended up in Harold's father's hands was unclear, but Dr. Harper speculated it might have been a wartime acquisition, perhaps a trade or a gift. Harold sat with this information, the watch ticking in his palm. It wasn't just a relic of his father. It was a piece of history, a bridge to a world he'd never known. Selling it now would be like erasing that connection. But Claire's voice lingered, urging practicality, and the weight of her concern pressed against his resolve. Harold's discovery about the watch shifted something in him. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of agency, a reason to keep going. He spent hours researching Émile Dubois, poring over library books and online archives. The watch wasn't just valuable. It was a testament to craftsmanship, to history, to the enduring power of human connection. He couldn't let it go yet. Claire, however, saw the watch's value as a solution to all their problems. She visited one weekend, her face drawn with worry. "Dad, I talked to Ethan. He says Sotheby's is interested. They're talking about a private sale, maybe even a museum acquisition. This could be life-changing." Harold looked at her, his daughter, so determined to protect him, but so blind to what mattered most. "Claire, this watch isn't just money. It's your grandfather's story. It's part of who we are. Don't you want to know where it came from?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I want you to be safe, Dad. I want you to have a future, not just a past. I know you miss Mom, and I know these things mean a lot to you. But I'm scared. I'm scared you'll fall, or the house will collapse, or I'll lose you too." Her voice broke, and Harold saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear he'd felt when Margaret got sick. He reached for her hand, his own trembling. "Claire, I'm not going anywhere. But I can't sell my heart to stay here. These things theory not just mine. They're yours too. Your history. Claire pulled her hand away, her expression torn. I don't know how to make you see reason. Dad. I'm trying to help. But you're making it so hard. The conversation ended there, unresolved. Harold felt the rift between them widening. But he couldn't bridge it, not yet. He needed time. And he needed answers. He arranged to meet Dr. Harper in person, bringing the watch and the note. She greeted him warmly, her office cluttered with books and artifacts. She examined the watch again, her eyes alight with curiosity. There's a chance, she said, that your father acquired this during the war. Soldiers often traded items, watches, jewelry for food or favors. If we can trace its path, we might uncover more about your family's story. Harold nodded, his heart lifting. The watch was a puzzle, and solving it felt like honoring his father's memory. Over the next few weeks, he and Dr. Harper corresponded with European historians, piecing together fragments of the watch's journey. They found records of a Swiss noble family, the Du Bois lineage, and a watch matching Harold's description listed in a 1901 inventory. The trail grew murkier after that, but each discovery fueled Harold's resolve. Claire, meanwhile, grew distant. Her calls were brief, her visits non-existent. Harold felt her absence keenly, but he couldn't let go of the watch, not when it held so much. He began to write down his memories, not just of the watch, but of all the antiques, the stories Claire had dismissed. He hoped, one day, she'd read them and understand. As winter approached, Harold faced a choice: sell the watch and secure his future, as Claire wanted, or keep it and pursue its story, risking his daughter's trust. The decision weighed on him, heavy as the watch in his pocket, its ticking a constant reminder of time slipping away. Winter settled over Vermont, blanketing Harold's home in snow. The repairs were complete, the house warmer and sturdier, but the emptiness remained. The attic, once crowded with treasures, felt like a hollow shell. Yet the watch, still in Harold's pocket, was a spark of light in the cold. One evening, Dr. Harper called with news. We found a letter in a Swiss archive, she said, her voice excited. It mentions a watch like yours, given to a soldier in 1918 as a gesture of gratitude. The soldier's name was Grayson, possibly your father. Harold's heart leapt. His father had rarely spoken of the war, but this connected the dots. The watch wasn't just a relic. It was a symbol of sacrifice, of human kindness across oceans and decades. He sat at the kitchen table, the watch in his hands, and wept not for loss, but for the clarity it brought. This was why he couldn't sell it. It wasn't just his story. It was his father's, and Claire's, and maybe even her children's one day. He called Claire, his voice steady despite the tears. I need you to come home. Claire, there's something you need to see. She arrived the next day, her face guarded but curious. Harold led her to the attic, where he'd laid out the watch, the note, and his written memories. He told her everything: Dr. Harper's findings, the watch's journey, the stories behind each antique. These aren't just things, he said. They're us. Our family. I can't let them go. Not completely. But I want you to understand why. Claire listened, her eyes tracing the watch's engravings, the pages of Harold's handwriting. For the first time, she didn't argue. She picked up a letter from Margaret, her fingers lingering on the faded ink. I didn't know, she said softly. I thought you were just holding on to pain. Harold took her hand. I'm holding on to love, Claire, and I want to share it with you. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I was so focused on keeping you safe. I didn't see what this meant to you. To us. They spent the day in the attic, reading the letters, sharing stories. Claire laughed, remembering the dining table, the crayon marks she'd left as a child. For the first time in years, Harold felt close to her, the rift between them narrowing. He decided to keep the watch, but he agreed to sell a few smaller pieces to fund a compromise, a part-time caregiver to ease Claire's worries, and a plan to donate some antiques to a local museum, where their stories could live on. The watch, though, would stay with him, a promise kept to his father and to himself. In the end, the true worth of Harold's antiques wasn't in their price tags, but in the connections they fostered between him and Margaret, him and his father, him and Claire. As spring arrived, melting the snow, Harold felt lighter. The house was still his. The watch still ticked, and his daughter's laughter echoed once more. Some treasures, he realized, were worth more than gold.